Before you hear my story, I want you to do something for me. I want you to think about the quietest moments in your life. Maybe it's the time just before dawn when the world holds its breath, or that gentle hush that falls after a fresh snow. For me, that quiet was my retirement. After 30 years of shouting into telephones, of talking men down from ledges and terrorists out of cockpits, silence wasn't just an absence of noise, it was a destination, it was the reward. I'd earned it with every life I saved, and every piece of my soul I'd traded away in tense, whispered negotiations across staticky phone lines. My name is Heather, and for 3 decades, I was the woman the FBI called when a conversation was the only thing standing between someone living and someone dying. I was their top hostage negotiator. But the thing about a life like that, you get so good at managing everyone else's crisis, you sometimes forget to notice the slow, quiet emergency unfolding in your own home. The call that changed everything didn't come on a secure government line. It came to my personal cell phone, just past 11 at night, shattering the peaceful quiet of my little condo. It was a man's voice, hurried and slick with a manufactured panic I recognized instantly. He said his name was Marco, and he was calling from a jail in Mexico. He said he had my grandson, my Ben, and he needed $20,000, wired immediately, or the Federales were going to make him disappear into a hole so deep no one would ever find him. It was a classic grandparent scam, a paint-by-numbers script of terror and urgency designed to short-circuit an elderly person's logic and hijack their love. They prey on the fear that lives in the heart of every grandparent, that primal terror of a child in danger, far from home. They were good. The details were just right. A shaky voice in the background, crying for his grandma, the stern-sounding Spanish, the impossible deadline. But they had made one catastrophic mistake. They assumed they were talking to a frail, frightened old woman who would dissolve into a puddle of panic and do exactly as she was told. They didn't know they had just dialed the one person on earth who had written the book on how to handle a call exactly like this. For 30 years I dealt with kidnappers, extortionists, and criminals of every stripe. This man, Marco, he thought he was the predator. He thought he was in control. He had no idea that from the moment I said hello, I wasn't his victim, I was his case officer. And as I started to feign the first wave of tears, my mind was already cold clear and running the protocol. I was going to keep him on the line. I was going to drain him of every last piece of information he had. And then, I was going to burn his entire world to the ground. What I didn't know yet was that Marco, the cheap two-bit scammer on the other end of the line, was only the first betrayal of the night. The second one, the one that truly mattered, was coming. And it would be far crueler, far deeper, and would force me to realize that the most dangerous hostage situation I'd ever been in wasn't in some foreign country. It had been my own life for the past 20 years. The first rule of any negotiation is to establish a connection, build rapport, create an emotional baseline, and above all control the tempo. So I gave Marco exactly what he expected: a gasp, a choked sob, the sound of a grandmother's world tilting off its axis. My voice trembled when I spoke, a carefully modulated performance of escalating fear. Ben? Oh my God, is he okay? What happened? Please, don't hurt him. I was feeding his ego, validating his power. In my mind, a switch had flipped. The cozy, lamplit living room of Heather the retiree faded away, replaced by the stark, soundproofed walls of the command center I carried inside my head. While one part of my brain was performing, the other was dissecting. Marco's accent, I noted, wasn't the standard Mexican Spanish you hear in the border towns. There was a subtle cadence, a lilt in his vowels that suggested something further south, maybe Colombian or Venezuelan. An immigrant working in a Mexican scam boiler room. Interesting, it was a detail. And details were ammunition. He launched into the script: a car accident. A rental car, of course. A minor fender bender with a very important man's nephew. Police were called, a search of the car, and they found a bag. He didn't say what was in it, leaving my terrified imagination to fill in the blanks. All lies, every word of it, but a well-constructed lie. $20,000, Senora, he said, his voice a low, urgent hum. It is not a fine, it is a kindness payment, to make the police report go away. You understand, the judge, he is not a patient man. The transfer has to be made before the banks open in the morning, before it becomes official. I knew the game, create an impossible timeline to force a rash decision. I needed to slow it down. I needed to own the clock. The bank, oh my God, I don't know. I don't have that kind of money just sitting there, I cried, the sound of my voice cracking. I need to call his mother. My daughter, Clara, she has access to his college fund. Maybe we can get it from there. It was the perfect, logical, panicked response. It was also my first strategic move. I needed a second phone line. I needed to initiate a trace. But more than that, in that moment, I genuinely believed I needed to warn my daughter. The thought that Ben could be in Mexico, in any kind of trouble, still sent a sliver of real ice through my veins, even though my head knew this was a fraud. Marco hesitated. This was a deviation from his script. Scammers want to isolate their victims. No, no, Senora, no time for that. You must do this. You are the grandmother. You do this for Ben. I can't, I shrieked, letting my voice rise into true hysteria. It wasn't entirely fake. The thought of my daughter, my only child, being unaware of this threat, it was unthinkable. She'll kill me if I empty my savings without telling her. It's our family money. Please, just 2 minutes. I'll put you on hold. I'll be right back. Please. I was giving him a problem, but also a solution. I was the panicked, flustered old woman who needed her daughter's help. It was plausible. After a tense second, he agreed. 2 minutes, Senora, not 1 second more. I pressed the hold button, my hand steady as a rock. My heart, however, was starting to pound with a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. I took a deep breath, slid my laptop open on the coffee table, and with my other hand, I dialed Clara. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice thick with sleep and annoyance. Mom? It's almost midnight. What's wrong? I didn't waste time. Clara, honey, I just got a terrible call. A man saying he has been in a jail in Mexico. They want $20,000. I waited for the explosion, the fear, the questions, the shared panic. It never came. Instead, there was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line, a sigh of pure, unadulterated exasperation. Oh God, what now? She said, her voice flat, tired. Is this about Cabo? I told him not to go. I told him he couldn't afford it. I froze. My blood went cold. The manufactured panic I'd been feeding Marco was suddenly replaced by a very real, very chilling dread. Cabo? He's in Cabo? What are you talking about? Yes, Mom, Cabo, she snapped, the irritation bleeding through. He went with his friends for a long weekend, maxed out the credit card you gave him for emergencies, I'm sure. What did he do? Crash a jet ski? Trash a hotel room? Greg and I were going to call you in the morning anyway. The resort manager left a message. He sounded furious. I couldn't speak. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Ben was in Mexico. He was in trouble. But it wasn't a kidnapping. It wasn't a federal jail. It was just Ben being Ben. And my daughter and her husband knew. They knew he was in some kind of jam, and they hadn't called me. They were waiting until morning to present me with the bill. The phone in my other hand felt like a block of ice. Marco, the scammer, was a stranger trying to steal my money. My own child had been planning to do the exact same thing, just with a little more politeness. The scam call wasn't an attack out of the blue. It was a bizarre cosmic coincidence that had ripped the curtain back on a private, long-running family swindle. You knew he was in trouble and you didn't tell me? My voice was a whisper. We were handling it, Mom, she said defensively. There was no point in waking you up and worrying you until we had the final number. Greg is furious. This is going to cost a fortune she expected me to pay, just like all the other fortunes. And suddenly it wasn't about the $20,000 anymore. It wasn't about the scammer. It was about that sigh. That weary put upon sigh from my daughter, as if my grandson's latest catastrophe was just another item on a long list of my responsibilities. My mind, trained to see patterns, started connecting dots that spanned decades. It was like a dam breaking. Flashbacks, sharp and painful, flooded me. I saw myself at a bank 15 years ago, co-signing a business loan for my son-in-law, Greg. A loan I ended up paying off myself when his brilliant gourmet dog biscuit company went under. I saw myself writing a check to cover Ben's tuition at a private high school his parents couldn't afford, because he deserves the best, Mom. I saw a parade of Christmases and birthdays where my gifts were always cash, always tucked into an envelope with a knowing look from Clara, a silent acknowledgement that this was for the mortgage, for the car payment, for the cruise they couldn't otherwise take. I remembered the conversation after my husband Michael died. He was a field agent killed during a raid gone wrong, a hero. At his funeral, after the folded flag and the 21-gun salute, Clara had held my hand. Dad always said his biggest mission was keeping us safe, she'd whispered. You have to promise you'll keep doing that for him, Mom. I had promised, and I had interpreted that promise as my sacred duty. I was the rock. I was the provider. I paid for the braces, the summer camps, the down payment on their ridiculously oversized house. I funded their entire upper-middle-class life. I did it because I loved them, yes, but also because I thought it was my mission. I was honoring my husband's memory by providing a fortress of financial security around his family. But standing there in my silent living room, with a criminal on one line and my own daughter on the other, I saw the truth with brutal clarity. It wasn't a fortress, it was a cage. And I wasn't the warden, I was the prisoner. They hadn't seen my support as love or protection. They saw it as a utility, an entitlement. My life's savings, my husband's pension, my own careful planning, it was just their emergency fund. I wasn't a mother or a grandmother. I was an institution, the First National Bank of Mom. The phone buzzed in my hand. Marco's 2 minutes were up. On the other line, Clara was still talking, oblivious. So whatever this is, Mom, you're just going to have to handle it. Greg says we are absolutely tapped out this month. Handle it. The 2 words echoed in the cavernous space that had just opened up inside my chest. It was the same tone I'd heard from incompetent police chiefs and arrogant ambassadors my entire career, the sound of someone abdicating responsibility and handing me their mess. The grief and shock I was feeling began to cool, to harden. It compressed into something dense and heavy. It was the cold, clean feeling of rage, not the hot, shouting kind. The quiet, methodical kind. The kind that builds operations and dismantles empires. A lifetime of being the family scapegoat, the ever-reliable provider, the quiet fixer of problems they were too careless to avoid, had just come to a head. The 2 phone calls, the 2 betrayals, had merged. The scammer in Tijuana and the entitled daughter in the suburbs were suddenly 2 heads of the same monster. A monster of casual parasitic greed that had been feeding on me for years. I took a breath. I have to go, Clara, I said, my voice eerfully calm. But what about Ben? The money? Don't worry, I said, and the words tasted like iron. I'm going to handle it. I hung up on her before she could reply. I looked at the hold button blinking on my cell phone. Marco was waiting for his money. My family was waiting for theirs. And I, Heather, retired FBI negotiator, had just accepted my final case. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about restructuring. A complete and total liquidation of the assets of my old life. And as I unmuted the call and put the phone back to my ear, I gave Marco my most convincing tear-choked performance yet. I'm here, I sobbed. I'm so sorry. Clara is wiring the money from her account. It might take a little time. The website is so confusing. Can you please help me? While he started explaining the intricacies of a wire transfer he'd never receive, my fingers flew across my laptop keyboard, my face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. I wasn't logging into my bank. I was logging into a secure encrypted network I hadn't touched in years. I was calling in my ghosts. They thought I was just a sweet old lady. They had all forgotten who I was. The architecture of my former life was built on secure networks and trusted contacts. It was a hidden world that ran parallel to the one of bake sales and book clubs my family thought I inhabited. While Marco was patiently condescendingly walking me through the fictional steps of a wire transfer, I was pulling up the digital equivalent of a black book. It contained the encrypted contact information for a handful of people, the best of the best I had ever worked with. Protégés, partners, and allies bound by shared trauma and mutual respect. My fingers paused over one name, David Chen, my old partner, the one person who could always tell when I was bluffing. He was retired now, too, running a high-end corporate security firm. He was my voice of reason, the man who had pulled me back from the emotional brink more times than I could count. I needed a sanity check. I needed to hear a friendly voice before I went operational, but I bypassed his name. This wasn't a moment for reason. It was a moment for action. My cursor landed on another name, Special Agent Marcus Riley, my protégé, a sharp, ambitious kid I'd handpicked from Quantico. I'd trained him, molded him. He owed me. I initiated a secure anonymous call through a relay server. He'd recognized the digital handshake. He picked up on the first ring, no greeting, just a cautious go for secure. "Riley, it's Heather," I said, my voice low and steady, a world away from the weeping grandmother on the phone with Marco. There was a beat of stunned silence. "Heather, is everything all right?" He paused, 2 in the morning on the East Coast. "I'm fine, Riley, but I'm in a situation." I gave him the 30-second synopsis, the scam call, the grandson, the Mexico location. "Classic grandparent scam," he said immediately. "We get dozens of these a week. Just hang up. We can file a report with IC3, but honestly, they're ghosts. Untraceable." "He's still on the line with me right now," I said calmly, "and I've been running a passive voice analysis. His dialect isn't local Mexican. It's got a distinct Andean cadence. I'm thinking Colombian, maybe Venezuelan, and he's using slang that's common in the Tijuana boiler rooms run by expat crews. I have his number. It's a burner, obviously, but it's pinging off a cell tower in the Zona Norte. I need you to get me a direct line to the legate in Mexico City. I also need you to activate a trace, not the standard one, the priority one you use for active kidnappings." There was another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head as he recalibrated his understanding of the situation. He wasn't talking to a civilian victim. He was talking to his old mentor, and she was already 3 steps ahead of him. You're running an operation," he said, a note of awe in his voice, "on your own scammer." "They made it personal, Riley," I said. "Now, are you going to help me, or do I need to call the deputy director? I hear he still remembers that favor I did for him in Minsk." "No, ma'am," he said, his tone shifting instantly to the crisp professionalism I'd drilled into him. "No need. I'm on it." "What else do you need?" This was the leverage my family never understood. The power I held wasn't in my bank account. It was in the currency of respect and loyalty I had earned over a lifetime of service. It was a language of mutual obligation that people like my daughter Clara and her husband Greg could never comprehend. "There's a complication," I continued, my fingers typing furiously as I spoke to Riley, all while murmuring to Marco on the other line. "Oh dear, it's asking for a Swift code." "What is that?" I opened a new browser tab. "My grandson Benjamin Foster is actually in Cabo San Lucas. He's staying at the El Corazon Resort. My family is hiding the details, but there's an issue with the hotel, a big one, from the sound of it. I need you to find out what it is. Quietly, use your sources." I need to know the full extent of the problem my family thinks I'm going to solve for them. Understood, Riley said. A parallel intelligence track. You want to know their exposure. I want to know my leverage, I corrected him. Get it done. I cut the connection. On the other phone, Marco was getting impatient. Senora, the SWIFT code is not important, just use the routing number. You must hurry. I'm so sorry, I whimpered. My hands are shaking so badly, I keep typing the numbers wrong. Can you tell me about where you are? Is it warm? It's so cold here. Thinking of the warmth helps me calm down. It was a classic delay tactic. Shift the focus, humanize the interaction, make him feel like he's managing me. He grunted, but started talking about the weather. While he did, an encrypted message popped up on my screen from Riley. It was a phone number, a direct line. The contact name read Comandante Mateo Delgado, Policia Federal, Baja California. It was followed by a note. He knows who you are. He remembers the '98 consulate case. He owes you. I smiled. The consulate case in Monterrey. A siege. I'd talked the ringleader down over 17 hours, and in the process saved the life of a young federal agent who had been taken hostage inside. That agent's name was Mateo Delgado. My network wasn't just a list of names, it was a web of history of shared danger and resolved crises. It was my real power. I put Marco on another brief, tearful hold, telling him I needed to get a glass of water or I would faint. Then I dialed Delgado. He answered in Spanish. Delgado, Commandane, I replied in the same language, my accent flawless. It is Heather Sterling. It has been a long time. The voice on the other end warmed instantly. Agente Sterling. I cannot believe it. After all these years, to what do I owe the honor? I need a favor, Mateo. I am on the phone with a man who is running an extortion scam from a call center I believe is in your jurisdiction, Tijuana. I am keeping him on the line, but I need a tactical team to geolocate the signal and move in. Consider it done, he said without hesitation. We have been hunting these crews for years. They are a plague. Send my operator the number. We will put a bird on it immediately. Are you in danger? Only of losing my patience, I said wryly. He thinks he's getting $20,000 from a frightened old woman. Delgado laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Then he is the one in danger. He has no idea who he is dealing with. My team is at your disposal, Heather. We will be the hammer. You just tell us where to strike. We coordinated the logistics in less than a minute, establishing a secure communications channel through an app on my phone. Delgado's team would be my eyes, and I would be their bait. I went back to Marco. My performance now was masterful. I was no longer just faking panic, I was building a rich, textured character. I was the slightly confused, technologically inept grandmother, terrified but trying her best. I made him explain the difference between a wire and an ACH transfer. I asked him to spell out the name of the recipient bank 3 times. I complained that my glasses were smudged and I couldn't read the screen. Each question, each fumble was another precious 5 minutes on the clock for Delgado's team. My living room was now a fully functional command center. On my laptop screen, I had 3 windows open, a live, updating GPS map from Delgado, showing a blinking red dot owning in on a location in Tijuana, a secure chat window with Riley, who was feeding me real-time information, and a third window where I was methodically going through every single one of my financial accounts. Passwords, security questions, beneficiary designations. I changed them all. I moved my liquid assets from my standard checking and savings into a high-yield trust account that required a 2-step verification process involving my lawyer. It was a digital fortress. I was sealing the bank of Mom, brick by electronic brick. Then a message from Riley popped into the chat window. It was a single sentence that made my breath catch. Got the report from the El Corazon. It's bad, Heather. Worse than you think. Attached was a file. I clicked on it. It was an internal security report from the resort faxed to an FBI contact in the area. Ben and his friends hadn't just trashed a room, they had broken into the hotel's main liquor storage, stolen thousands of dollars of high-end alcohol, and hosted a massive party on the beach that resulted in 2 other guests being injured and a significant amount of property damage. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Ben had tried to bribe the security manager with a bag of pills to make it all go away. The manager, a former cop, had recognized them as prescription opiates. The resort wasn't calling the Mexican police because they didn't want the scandal, especially since they suspected one of their own staff had helped the kids. They were handling it internally. The $50,000 Clara had mentioned wasn't a fine, it was blackmail. They were demanding payment to destroy the security footage and not turn my grandson over to the authorities for felony drug distribution. My grandson, the golden child. The boy who, according to his parents, was just a little high-spirited. He wasn't just a spoiled brat who had gotten in over his head. He was a criminal, a reckless, dangerous one, and my daughter and son-in-law knew. They must have known the severity of it. Their plan wasn't just to ask for money, it was to use me to cover up a felony. The cold fury inside me solidified into something akin to diamond, hard, sharp, and unbreakable. This was no longer just about drawing a line, it was about severing the connection entirely. The family I thought I was protecting no longer existed. It was an illusion I had funded for 2 decades. The blinking red dot on Delgado's map stopped moving. It pulsed steadily over a small building labeled Cyber Paraiso Internet Cafe. A message from Delgado appeared. Team is in position, awaiting your signal. I took a deep breath. It was time for the takedown. I had my leverage. I had my allies. The secret plan was in motion. Now it was time to make my first move. The transition from planning to execution is a delicate one. It's the moment the carefully constructed blueprint becomes a physical reality. My entire living room seemed to shrink, the focus narrowing to the 2 phones and the laptop screen that represented the 2 fronts of my war. On one side was Marco, the immediate, predictable threat. On the other was my family, the deep, insidious one. I decided to deal with the simple problem first. Marco, I said, my voice filled with a newfound, shaky relief. I think it worked. The screen says transfer initiated. It gave me a confirmation number. Do you want it? It was the bait. The final, irresistible morsel of hope that would lock his attention completely. His voice, which had been growing tight with suspicion, flooded with relief and greed. Yes, senora, give it to me now. The number. I began reading out a string of fake digits, slowly, deliberately, making him repeat each one back to me. As I did, I typed a single word into the secure chat to Comandante Delgado, execute. Through Marco's phone, I heard the faint, distant sound of a door being kicked off its hinges, then shouting, first in Spanish, then in English. Policia Federal, get on the ground, manos arriba. On the ground now, Marco yelped. There was a clatter as his headset hit a desk, a series of frantic, terrified yelps, the sound of bodies hitting the floor, and then an authoritative voice, Delgado's voice, speaking close to the phone. Agente Sterling, he said, his voice crisp and clear. The package is secure. The entire crew. Looks like a dozen of them. We're shutting them down. Good work, Mateo, I replied, my own voice perfectly level. Thank you. The honor was all mine, he said, and the line went dead. I placed my phone gently back in its cradle. Phase 1 was complete. The immediate threat was neutralized. The silence that followed was profound. It was the calm after a storm, but I knew it was only the eye of the hurricane, the bigger, more chaotic storm front. My family was still on its way. My phone started ringing almost immediately. The caller ID read, Clara. I looked at it, then deliberately pressed the silence button. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. A moment later, a text message appeared. Mom, pick up. The resort manager is calling Greg again. He says we have 1 hour. I read the message and felt nothing, a strange, hollow calm. It was the emotional detachment I'd had to learn from my job, a professional shield to protect me from the chaos of a crisis. I had never once thought I would have to use it on my own daughter. Another call, this time from Greg. I silenced it too. Then a text from him, Heather, this isn't a joke. Ben is in serious trouble. Where is the money you promised? Promised. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I had never promised anything. They had demanded, they had expected, they had presumed. I continued my work, transferring the last of my accessible funds, closing a joint credit card I still shared with Clara for emergencies, and drafting an email to my estate lawyer with the subject line, "Complete restructuring." The phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text from my sister, Judy. Heather, Clara just called me in hysterics. What is going on? She said you're refusing to help Ben. They were activating their network, calling in the family cavalry to apply pressure, to guilt me into submission. It was a classic tactic of emotional coercion. They were treating this like a family disagreement, a spat over money. They still didn't understand the ground had fundamentally shifted beneath their feet. They thought I was having a tantrum. They had no idea I was conducting a demolition. For the next hour, I sat on my sofa in the quiet glow of my laptop and watched my family panic from a distance. The texts and voicemails created a real-time log of their escalating desperation. It was a fascinating, if heartbreaking, study in entitlement. First came the confusion, then the wounded indignation, then the accusations. I was selfish, I was cruel, I was betraying my husband's memory. Greg, in a particularly florid voicemail, accused me of being senile, of having lost my mind, and threatened to get power of attorney to protect my assets from my own foolishness. That was a mistake on his part. It showed me his hand. It wasn't just about this one-time payment, it was about ensuring his long-term access to my resources. The thought of my son-in-law, a man whose greatest business achievement was a failed dog biscuit bakery, trying to have me declared incompetent, was so absurd it was almost funny. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. His threat was the turning point. It shifted my motivation from self-preservation to something harder, colder, vindication. I had spent 2 hours on the phone with a professional criminal who had shown more respect for my intelligence than my own family had in 20 years. Marco at least had the decency to be a stranger. My phone rang again. It was Clara. This time I answered. "It's done," I said, before she could even speak. Her voice was a ragged mess of tears and fury. "What's done?" "The transfer? Did you send it?" "The manager is on his way over to their room. He's with hotel security." "No, Clara," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I mean we are done, you and me, Greg and me, this entire arrangement. It's over." There was a stunned, gasping silence on the other end. What are you talking about?" "I know about the pills, Clara," I said softly. "I know about the blackmail. I know you weren't calling me for help with a trashed hotel room. You were calling me to fund the cover-up of a felony drug crime. You were going to let me pay $50,000 without ever telling me that my grandson was facing serious prison time." I could hear her breath catch, a sharp, terrified inhale. She was speechless. For the first time in her adult life, she had no script. "How? It doesn't matter how," I said. "What matters is that the Bank of Mom is officially closed. Its assets have been frozen and are being liquidated. You and Greg wanted Ben to have the best of everything. You wanted him to be shielded from all consequences. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. You have raised a son who is a spoiled, reckless criminal, and now you, and you alone, get to deal with the fallout. Do not call me again." I hung up the phone. I leaned my head back against the sofa and closed my eyes, the silence in the apartment now feeling absolute. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the heavy, weighted silence of a world irrevocably changed. The family I had known was gone. In its place was a group of strangers to whom I owed nothing. A notification chimed on my laptop. It was an email from my lawyer, a tough-as-nails woman named Sarah, whom I'd hired precisely because she was unsentimental. The subject line read, Re-yo-gent, complete restructuring. The body of the email was short and sweet. Message received, Heather. I'll get the paperwork started first thing in the morning. Good for you. The power shift was complete. They just didn't know it yet. They still thought they had moves to make. They still thought they held some sort of emotional claim on me. They would learn in the harsh light of the coming day just how wrong they were. The panic was only just beginning. The aftermath of a successful operation is often deceptively quiet. The adrenaline recedes, leaving behind a hollowed-out exhaustion and the stark reality of the new landscape you've created. I slept for 3 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep, and woke to the first pale light of dawn. For a moment I felt a pang of something, a phantom limb of maternal obligation. A voice in my head whispered, "What have you done?" Then my phone, which I'd left on the coffee table, began to buzz incessantly. A barrage of texts. One after another, they painted a picture of a family in full-blown meltdown. They had entered the desperate counter-moves phase. Greg texted first. "I'm on my way over. We are going to talk about this, Heather. You've had some kind of breakdown, and we are going to fix it." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. He still thought he was in charge. Then Clara. The resort took Ben's passport. They said they are calling the consulate at 9 a.m. if they don't have the money. Mom, please. This is his whole future. Her whole future, I thought. Not his. Hers. Her future of not having a felon for a son. A text from my sister Judy. Again, Clara says you've cut her off. After everything she does for you. After all the time she spends making sure you're okay. I'm shocked, Heather. Truly shocked. The revisionist history was galling. Clara hadn't visited me in 6 months. Our weekly calls were 5-minute check-ins where she recited her list of problems before asking if I needed anything from the store, a token gesture she knew I'd refuse. The final message was the one that sealed it. It was from Greg. Tried to use the emergency card to book a flight to Cabo. It was declined. What did you do? I'm warning you, Heather. You're playing with fire. I've already called your bank pretending to be you, said you were confused and had lost your card. They wouldn't help. You forced my hand. He had tried to impersonate me to my own bank. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance. The confirmation that he saw my assets as his own. That was it. Any lingering wisp of doubt I had evaporated like mist in the morning sun. I got up, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table as the sun rose, feeling a grim sense of purpose settle over me. I was no longer just the victim of their entitlement. I was now the architect of their consequences. The doorbell rang at precisely 7:30 a.m. I knew it would be Greg. I saw his car, a late-model luxury SUV I'd helped him buy, parked haphazardly at the curb. I didn't answer. He rang again, then started pounding on the door. "Heather, I know you're in there. Open this door right now." I sipped my coffee. I could hear him shouting through the door, his voice muffled but furious. He was causing a scene in my quiet condo community. Let him. Let all my neighbors see the kind of man my daughter had married. Finally, his shouting stopped. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was the front gate security. "Mr. Miller, there's a Gregory Foster here to see you," the young guard said. I must have misheard the name. My last name is Sterling. My husband's name was Sterling. Greg was a Foster. "Miller?" I asked. "My name is Sterling." "Oh, sorry, ma'am," the guard said, confused. "He said he was your son-in-law, and he had power of attorney. He showed me some paperwork. The name on it was Heather Miller. He said you sometimes get confused about your name. My maiden name, Miller." He had come prepared. He had brought some kind of forged or fraudulent document, anticipating that he would need to prove he had authority over me. He wasn't just trying to bully me, he was trying to legally erase me. The debatable character logic of my past passivity became crystal clear. I had not been enabling them, I had been surviving them by placating them. But no more. That man is not to be allowed on this property, I told the guard, my voice steel. He is harassing me. If he doesn't leave immediately, I will be calling the police to have him removed for trespassing. There was a pause. Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am, I hung up. This was a complete power shift. For years they had set the terms of our relationship. They created the drama, and I provided the resolution. Now I was setting the terms, and the term was goodbye. They had metaphorically, and now almost literally, been exiled from my life. The family exodus was not my leaving them, but my ejecting them from my orbit. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone with Sarah, my lawyer. We went over the details of the new trust. I was disinheriting Clara, and by extension her family, completely. My entire estate, the condo, the investment portfolio, my husband's generous federal pension, was to be placed in a charitable foundation upon my death. The foundation's mission, to provide scholarships and support for the children of FBI agents killed in the line of duty. It was the promise I'd made to Michael, reinterpreted and purified. Not to keep our spoiled family safe from consequences, but to keep other families, families of true sacrifice, safe from hardship. It was poetic, it was final. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, brought up the power of attorney threat. It's a scare tactic, Heather. To get you declared incompetent, he'd need testimony from doctors, a psychological evaluation. It's a long, expensive, and ugly process. And given your professional history, I dare say any judge would laugh him out of court. But the fact he's waving a piece of paper around means he's desperate. Be careful. I wasn't scared. I was prepared. The final confrontation was coming. I knew they wouldn't just give up. Their entire lifestyle depended on my capitulation, but they were coming into this battle completely unarmed. They thought their weapons were guilt, shame, and family obligation. They had no idea my weapons were truth, independence, and a very good lawyer. The doorbell rang again around noon. This time I looked through the peephole and saw both of them, Clara and Greg. Clara's face was pale and blotchy from crying. Greg looked like a thundercloud, his jaw tight with fury. They looked smaller somehow, less imposing. Just two desperate people standing on my doorstep. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. They stood there on my doorstep, a portrait of impotent rage. Clara's eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, her expression a mixture of disbelief and wounded accusation. Greg was practically vibrating with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like a man who was used to getting his way through sheer volume and intimidation, and was utterly baffled to find it wasn't working. "I cannot believe you," Clara began, her voice trembling. "I cannot believe you would do this to us, to your own family, to Ben." "Come in, Clara," I said, my voice neutral. I stepped back and held the door open. They hesitated for a second, surprised by the invitation, then stormed past me into the living room, as if they owned the place. Greg immediately started pacing, his heavy footsteps scuffing my polished hardwood floors. "What is this, Heather?" he boomed, wheeling on me. "Some kind of sick power trip? You're going to let your grandson's life be ruined over a little misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Greg," I said calmly, closing the door and turning to face them. I remained standing, a subtle power move. This was my territory, they were visitors. And this is not a little anything. Your son committed a felony, he is a drug dealer, and you came to me not for help, but for a cover-up. You lied to me, and you intended to steal $50,000 from me under false pretenses. Clara flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Steal? We would never steal from you. We were going to ask you. It was a loan, we would have paid you back." The lie was so reflexive, so practiced, that it was almost sad. We all knew they had never paid back a single significant loan in their entire marriage. Paid me back with what, Clara? I asked, my voice still quiet. Greg's last brilliant business idea? Your part-time job at the boutique? The money you get from renting out the upstairs bedroom that I paid the down payment for? Each question landed like a stone. Greg stopped pacing and glared at me. This is not about money, it's about family. It's about loyalty. It's about the promise you made to Michael to look after us. You are right, I said, and a flicker of triumph crossed his face. This is about the promise I made to Michael. I promised to keep his family safe, and for 20 years I have confused safe with insulated. I have protected you from debt, from responsibility, from every bad decision and consequence. I see now that in doing so, I haven't kept you safe. I have made you weak. I have made you greedy. I have helped you turn your own son into a criminal. My protection was a poison, and the antidote is to stop. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up a thin file folder. It was the report from Agent Riley. I held it out. This is not a little misunderstanding. This is your son, on camera, attempting to bribe a hotel manager with a commercial quantity of prescription narcotics. This is a 10-year mandatory minimum in a Mexican federal prison if that resort manager decides to make one phone call. Clara stared at the folder as if it were a snake. She wouldn't take it. Greg snatched it from my hand and ripped it open. I watched his face as he read. The blustering anger drained away, replaced by a pasty, sickly pallor. He read the details of the theft, the damages, the confrontation with security. He saw the name of the drug, the quantity, and the potential charges. He finally understood. He had been fighting a fire, thinking it was a campfire, and had just been shown the blueprint of a nuclear reactor. This can't be right, he stammered, looking at Clara. This is a lie. She's making this up to scare us. Am I? I asked softly. Agent Riley of the FBI's regional office compiled that report for me this morning as a professional courtesy. You can call him if you like. His number is on the last page. I assure you he is very real. The new reality was beginning to dawn on them, the world they had lived in, a world where Mom was a magical source of funds, a get-out-of-jail-free card, was gone. They were alone, facing a problem of their own making. A problem far bigger than they had ever imagined. So what now? Clara whispered, her voice finally breaking. The fight was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. You're just going to do nothing. No, not nothing, I said. I walked over to my writing desk and picked up another document. It was a single sheet of paper from my lawyer, a notice of intent. I'm doing this. I handed it to Clara. She took it with a trembling hand. She read it, then looked up at me, her eyes wide with utter incomprehension. You're cutting us out of the will? I am restructuring my estate, I corrected her gently, effective immediately. Everything will be placed into a trust. Upon my death, the trust will fund a charitable foundation in your father's name. It will provide for the families of fallen agents. It's what he would have wanted. Real sacrifice, being honored by real support. Greg snatched the paper from her hand. He read it and let out a choked, incredulous laugh. You're insane. You're a vindictive old woman. After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me, Greg? I asked, and my voice was finally truly my own, free of performance, free of negotiation. It was just the truth. What have either of you done? You haven't been a family to me. You've been my longest, most difficult, and least rewarding negotiation, and I'm finally walking away from the table. I looked at my daughter, at the woman my child had become. Your son, your house, your life, they are your responsibility. My life is mine. This is the new reality. I suggest you get used to it. They stood there for a long moment, utterly broken. The anger, the entitlement, the blustering confidence, all of it had been stripped away, leaving two terrified, unprepared people. They had built their entire existence on the foundation of my support, and I had just dynamited it. Without another word, they turned and walked out of my home. As the door clicked shut behind them, I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt a profound and aching sadness for the family I had lost, but an even more profound sense of relief for the freedom I had just reclaimed. The weight of their world was no longer on my shoulders. I was finally truly retired. In the weeks that followed, the silence in my condo was different. It was no longer the fragile quiet of a temporary peace. It was the deep, resonant silence of true solitude. It was the sound of my own life, uncomplicated by the manufactured crises of others. The fallout for Clara and Greg was, from what I gathered through the grapevine of my sister's reluctant updates, catastrophic and swift. They had to sell their house, the ridiculously oversized one I had helped them buy, to pay the fine to the resort in Cabo, and hire an expensive Mexican lawyer to negotiate a deal for Ben. He avoided prison but was deported, and now has a felony record that will follow him for the rest of his life. Their marriage, built on a foundation of shared entitlement and financial ease, crumbled under the weight of actual responsibility. Last I heard, they were separated, living in small rented apartments and struggling to make ends meet. They were facing the natural consequences of their own choices. It wasn't my revenge, it was their reality, and me. I took a trip. It was a trip I had been planning to take with my husband Michael before he was killed. A cruise through the fjords of Norway. I stood on the deck of the ship, wrapped in a warm coat, and watched the colossal, ancient cliffs slide by, their peaks shrouded in mist. The air was so clean and cold it felt like I was breathing for the first time. One afternoon, while sitting in a lounge and watching the stunning landscape, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar international number. For a moment, my old instincts kicked in, a jolt of adrenaline, but it was just Agent Riley. "Just checking in, Heather," he said, his voice warm. "Wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm more than okay, Riley," I said, a genuine smile in my voice. "I'm in Norway." "Good for you," he said. "I also wanted to let you know that tip you gave us, the scammer Marco. His crew was part of a much larger syndicate. By seizing their servers, we were able to unravel a network that was responsible for bilking seniors out of an estimated $10 million over the last 5 years. You didn't just stop one scammer, Heather. You took down an entire organization." The director sends his personal thanks. I felt a swell of pride, but it was a quiet, contained pride. It felt good, but it wasn't the victory that mattered most. The real victory was the silence, the peace, the view of the fjord outside my window. "Just doing my job, Riley," I said. Even in retirement, we chatted for a few more minutes, the easy, comfortable talk of two old colleagues. He told me about his kids. I told him about the beauty of the glaciers. When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, just thinking. I thought about the two kinds of prisons we can find ourselves in. There's the kind Marco threatened, with iron bars and guards. And then there's the other kind, the prisons of expectation, of guilt, of toxic family obligation. They have no walls, but they can be just as confining. For 20 years I lived in one of those prisons, one I had helped to build and maintain. I thought I was being kind, being a good mother, honoring my husband's memory. But you have to understand, there's a difference between kindness and enabling. Kindness is helping someone who has fallen. Enabling is patting the ground so they never feel the impact of their own stumbles. It doesn't make them stronger, it makes them careless. They start to believe they can fly, and they will drag you down with them when they inevitably fall. What I did, it might seem harsh to some. I know there will be people who say I abandoned my family, that I was cold or cruel, and maybe there's some truth to that. It wasn't about revenge until it was, but it wasn't revenge on them. It was about taking revenge on the person I had allowed myself to become a silent, compliant resource. My final negotiation wasn't with a terrorist or a kidnapper, it was with myself. I had to negotiate for my own freedom, for my own future. And the price of that freedom was my old life. It was a price I was in the end more than willing to pay. The most important boundary you will ever set is the one that protects your own peace, your own self-worth. You teach people how to treat you, and sometimes the hardest lesson you have to teach is that the class is over, the tuition is no longer free, and the bank is permanently closed. Thank you for listening to my story. I know that family can be complicated, and many of you have probably faced your own difficult situations. If my story resonated with you, I'd be honored if you'd share your own experiences in the comments below. It helps to know you're not alone. And if you'd like to hear more stories about finding strength when you need it most, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It means the world.